Hey, everybody, welcome to the Open Network User Group podcast. I'm Mark Tierney. I'm ONUG's CTO. And, today we're going to sort of leverage off of something that I've been doing in the podcast recently. I've been doing a C-level series with several CEOs of providers, most of them ONUG partners, talking about hyperautomation. We've been talking about the hyperautomation narrative through collaboration, and been really lucky to get some powerhouse CEOs to join us for that. But today we're going to kind of leverage off of that and get right with the hyperautomation working group at ONUG and dig in a little further into what that means, what it means to ONUG and ONUG members. And we're going to have a little fun with it. But before I get to our guests, listen up. ONUG Spring 2023. It's going to be another hybrid event. It's going to be in my hometown, Dallas, Texas. It's going to be at Union Station, which is like the hub of a lot of things that happen in downtown Dallas, May 17th and 18th of 2023. Come join the ONUG community of Global 2000 companies, enterprise architects, cloud providers, thought leaders, as we demonstrate the tenets of multi-cloud. And as it turns out, a lot of hyperautomation stuff. So you can go to onug.net to register for this event. You can use the promo code Mark's Podcast, and you'll save a truckload of money, like 30%. It'll be awesome. All right, so with that, let's get started. Joining me for today's podcast, I've got Kurush Saraf. He is a VP of Product and Marketing. Product marketing, it's like you can't tell him apart anymore, Kurush. He's with ZPE. Michael Howell, he's a VP of Product Management and Marketing at Glueware. I think they do the same thing, right? We'll figure that out. And then Brian Silverman, who's the chair of the Hyperautomation Working Group. He's Senior Architect for Network and Cloud at McKesson. Hey, guys, how's it going?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Nice. No, seriously, thanks for joining me. I'll go ahead and give you guys props. I have to. I would never say this to these people individually, but we have such an amazing team. I mean, the team formerly known as Orchestration Automation, and now the Hyperautomation team, is probably one of the most vocal teams. Pretty mature. Me notwithstanding, pretty mature group of people that get together and really punch through some difficult topics, always to do what we do at ONUG, which is to help the enterprise consumer sort of make their way through this complicated environment. And guys, I was struck when Gartner dropped the term hyperautomation. I don't know, it seems like over a year ago now, probably more like a year and a half now. And I always think it sends the world into a tizzy when a new term comes out. And so because of that, we're trying to sort through that as a group. Brian, I'm going to go to you first. Just, what's your sense? I mean, you've been riding herd over the O&A team for, a while, and now we've got, new terminology that we got to sort through. How does the team sort of address that? And, why is it important right now?
Hi, Mark. Yeah, no, thanks. That's a great question, and thank you very much for inviting us and hosting the podcast. It's great to speak to everybody. So it's a great question, and when we first brought up the question about hyperautomation, the term itself, we raised a number of concerns were raised. We are an industry that loves its buzzwords, and it seems like every 6 months, every year, there's something new, something cool. But typically after a new buzzword is introduced, it takes some time to figure out, well, what does this actually mean? And is this marketing, which was important and we need, but or is this something different than that, something beyond just kind of a new way to organize ideas? And so we talked a lot about it, and having Gartner stand behind it and kind of introduce it definitely lends it some weight. And just kind of within the team, because the team the working group is represented by, or is made up of folks both from the vendor community, but also from the enterprise community. We really felt like there was something there. And so, to us, I mean, there's a formal Gartner definition, and there's a great blog that Mike has written, and he'll talk a bit about that, I'm sure, to kind of outline some of this. But it really sort of focused on a lot of the work that we were already doing, or encompassed a lot of the work that we were already doing in kind of the automation and orchestration space. It combined, some of the conversations we had around things like AI ops, around infrastructure automation, and then kind of classic orchestration and automation. And so, there was definitely a lively debate, and one that we continue to have, but we felt like it was an apt term and something that we wanted to, carry forward by reflecting it in our name change.
Yeah, so let me sort of build on that concept. One of the things that we're doing on the hyperautomation team now is really launching a series, a blog and podcast series around these things. And one of the things, Michael, that happened, I want to go to you next because you are the author of the sort of the inaugural blog of the hyperautomation, newly named hyperautomation team. It one of the things that I've thrown out to a lot of these C-levels that I've been interviewing is, how do you separate, hype from reality? And my belief is what happens is that, a new term comes out and then there's a bit of a scramble. You get this scramble where, wow, suppliers now have this initial need, this pressure. I don't know if it's positive pressure or just pressure to close a marketing gap, to close a marketing hole, potentially, to say I'm fulfilling this need, or my product in some way fulfills this need. Then, quite frankly, aligned with that, conversely, I guess I'd say, is on the enterprise consumption side. You then have, people like, Brian at large, consuming firms, where executives at these firms, inside the enterprise are now going, well, what are we doing in this space? What are we doing from a hyperautomation, perspective? And this is where I feel like ONUG can really close gaps. I see people like you, I see people like Kurish, I see people from other suppliers that help us work together, like very deferential to one another, to create taxonomies and roadmaps, and to help enterprise consumers sort of answer these questions, right? And you put a lot of effort, Michael, into some of the original taxonomy documents of this team. Why don't you just, if you don't mind, like give us a little background? I'd be really interested in your perspective between like the old taxonomy and where we're going. Like, I kept putting you on the spot, but
sure,
give me
Mark.
your perspective on this.
I think what is important for the listeners here is to understand that we're trying to give you some insight as to what's happening on the working group calls that are happening weekly. And when the to a little bit of historical context is when the working group was founded back in fall of 2019. The effort within ONUG and the formation of working groups is driven by the needs of the community, right? So the ONUG community, made up of a lot of large enterprise, is saying automation is extremely important, right? And Mark, this ties into what you were talking about, which is, are things driven from a technology standpoint because we have to evolve our technology, which is a little bit bottoms up, right? Like, what are we doing with our tech, and are we modernizing? Are we moving to SD-WAN and all these technologies that are rolling out? But then you have the top down, the C-level perspective, and I would say at the end of 2019, when you looked at automation, while everyone would acknowledge it was important, it wasn't like on the top 5 of most CIO, CTO, CEO. Automation is important, but it's not the top 5, right? There's many other things that make their list. And when we formed that working group, orchestration was put in front of automation because the perspective was that there's kind of a lot of automation out there. And what, in our terminology, we refer to it as task-based automation. A lot of individual functions that are automated, but you're kind of lacking the end-to-end process and all these other things. And so the initial focus of the working group was about elevating and maturing automation to be a more orchestrated activity. And so the first couple of years of we first put out the taxonomy document, which kind of outlined a few of the challenges around just the fact that enterprises are multi-domain. They're not just a data center, they're not just a WAN. it's multi-domain. And one of the most important domains arising is cloud. And as everyone starts to look at cloud, cloud has nice automation, and you start to look at all these domains, and you ultimately are beginning to automate, but in bits and pieces and not well coordinated across all these domains. And so we kind of took on the effort of helping enterprises take a look at their existing domains, think about what they have in their O&A layer, right? Like, what is your current state? And also look at the management plane. Do you have a CMDB? Do you have an IPAM? Do you have SNMP? Or kind of look at the big picture. And the taxonomy kind of laid those things out. And our initial focus was on moving from task-based automation to orchestrated process automation. And a lot of work was done around integrating APIs, which is a very important component of it. Well, in the context of what's happened and what's led towards the renaming of the working group, several things happened. One is, COVID hit and the pandemic and the lockdown, and that really impacted a lot of organizations. And in most organizations, it accelerated their digital transformation strategies. So now the reliance on the digital business, the thing to, operate your own business, but also connect with partners and customers all digitally and rely on the underlying infrastructure was like top priority. So what evolved was, and most enterprises realize this, is that automation and orchestration is a key enabler of that. So now automation did start to bubble up to the top of that list. Like, what are we doing to enable digital transformation and so on and so forth. So I think that's a big paradigm shift that happened, and that raised the importance of O&A, we'll call it. And then within the work, so people also understand the context of ONUG is there was a working group spun up around AI ops. And everyone knows, again, another buzzword, but it's a technology that is becoming real with machine learning and algorithms and, autonomous capabilities that can start to provide insight or, automate certain things. And quite a few vendors are introducing AI capabilities to the marketplace. I wouldn't say they're widespread, especially in the network infrastructure. We always use the analogy of like the autonomous car, right? Most folks are a little resistant to like taking the hands off the wheel. Like, if there's a fear perspective. And when you think about the network and letting the network run autonomously, there's just too many conservative organizations out there to say, yeah, we're going to just build some rules in and, let the algorithms figure it out. And so it's going to be a journey. But within O&A, within the AI ops working group, they did a bunch of great work, but ultimately our worlds were kind of converging of O&A and AI ops. In fact, when we put together in spring of 2020, when we put out our maturity model of like, when you look at O&A and it maturing, what is the top of the pyramid? And it is AI ops. Ultimately,
it is AI ops.
Yeah, right. You're trying to get to this. So, and there's also a component of, too many working groups spreads good resources across too many efforts. And so there was just an idea of consolidation. So when AI ops was consolidated into O&A, it's kind of like, when two companies merge, whose logo do you keep? I went through this where
right.
You change the logo so you can incorporate that brand and that family. And we essentially had to expand the scope. So what's happened in the last few months within our working group is a lot of discussions around expanding our charter. And so I think that's the most important takeaway, is that we've expanded our charter, if you read the blog, and the charter is now made up of 3 key work areas, which is AI ops is one, O&A as another, and automation infrastructure as a third. Now, I think people can consume things in lists, right? Like, you think and you want to structure data and you want to look at things. And so that's a good way to structure things in terms of there's various people within our community that are taking leadership in those areas. So it made sense also with the personnel that we have contributing. But really, these 3 key work areas are very interrelated. And as we developed our charter, and again, I invite everybody to read the blog and look at our key areas of of interest and work, we started talking about renaming the working group. And obviously we are all aware of Gartner's producing this hyperautomation. And just to tie it into what you were saying about, there was actually pretty good debate about hyperautomation. Those of us who are very technical are like, oh my God, it's like it's a buzzword and it doesn't really mean anything. But what it can do to tie this all together is it can get this senior staff saying, what are we doing in these areas? And I think it's a very effective, if you just look at Gartner's definition and you look at the 10 bullets or whatever, and it's AI and ML and event driven and RPA and low code, no code. If you just kind of look through that list, a senior exec could look at it and then start to turn towards the engineering staff and saying, well, what are we doing in these areas? Like, are we on this path? Are we, and I would say,
and there's some, yeah, and there's real struggles doing all this, right? So inside, I don't want to bury the lead for the next series, but Kurush, Kurush has also authored a blog. We're going to talk about that on the next podcast. But Kurush, I feel like like ZPE sits in an interesting position that straddles a lot of the three areas that Michael is referring to, particularly from, and I don't want to put you or your organization into a box or anything, but you do have strong opinions on observability and maybe the struggles that enterprises are facing. Maybe give a little insight if you could on Michael's comments about some of the struggles that enterprises are dealing with while they try to go after these these three areas, like whether it's AI ops or orchestration and automation or automated infrastructure. What are you seeing out there that you feel like enterprises are dealing with?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm actually so excited to talk about so many topics. So hopefully all of this is going to come out coherent. So in terms of, I'm a product guy, right? I've been doing this product management thing and for 20 years. And I think that one piece that is always important is what is the pain point and the problem that's trying to be solved. And from a customer perspective, what I have experienced, and ZPE has been doing this for about 8-9 years now, is that the problem that they're trying to solve is a combination of agility to be able to apply security patches quickly, so that if there's a hole in some infrastructure piece and potentially ransomware can get in, instead of being on a software version that's 2 years old, kind of apply the patches immediately and not really worry about spending the weekend in the data center or in front of your desk trying to recover.
Not that that's not awesome or anything, but yeah.
Right. So it's the pain of, okay, let's be agile. Let's go ahead and push the security patches out there. Let's not have all this old software that's laying around. And I think the reason that cloud automation or cloud is so loved is that a lot of that work is enabled in a safe fashion, right? So the tools are provided so that you can apply automation right onto the infrastructure and get the outcome without really worrying about the cloud going down. Or if it goes down, you just spin up another one and you don't really chop your legs off, right? And those are the types of customers that we've been working with. Is that this whole thing started back in probably about 10 years ago, where cloud vendors, hyperscalers, were built a second network around their primary production network to enable automation. And that's why they've been doing automation from 10 years ago. And that was, but when I talk, and here's a question to the audience, how many of you guys are doing automation? And so what we sense is there was an anxiety around automation. Blueware, excellent tools. Everybody should be using these tools, right? Everybody should be already embracing AI ops. And we saw this anxiety that people have that, okay, what if the machines take over my network? How do I get it back and recover? And so even large customers that we deal with today, they run scripts off of their laptop, right? So they have scripts and they kind of think about that as automation, that I don't have to type the commands one by one, but they're still have to be present. They have to connect to the equipment and they maybe type 20 commands at a time in there. And so what we want to enable and remove the anxiety from automation is it's safe. You don't have to take so much time in maybe modeling the network, in worrying about taking down the network. And so that's what led to me looking at the customers that we have and interviewing them as to, what are you guys really doing? And this this additional layer that I'm thankful for the team to add into the charter, that automation AI ops are the tools that should be used, but to have them be safe and remove this anxiety and accelerate automation such that both cloud and on-premise or private cloud, collectively hybrid infrastructure can be automated, is to have a automation infrastructure, right? So that even if the automation goes sideways, you can quickly recover. And that's for the customers that have basically educated me that that's really what they want to do, so that they can embrace automation, have with no anxiety, and take over. Basically.
Let's jump on this embrace thing, because one of the things that look, most people know I've been in and around ONUG for years and years and years. I've been on the payroll for a little over a year, and one of the things I like about what we do on the teams, on the working groups, is it's not just about the tech. Like, we also talk, and Michael's blog really goes into it a bit on, we talk about people and process. A lot of times what I consider like culture issues. Brian, I wonder if are you feeling, putting you on the spot, but I mean, are you feeling like there are people, process, cultural issues that that you're having to deal with whenever you're dealing with any kind of new technology? It just strikes me that there's always some cultural hurdles that we're trying to get through or over or whatever. And my hope is that the kinds of work that we're doing on the working groups help those enterprise consumers sort of bust through that. But what's your take on it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have many feelings on the topic. I do. Yeah, I think in many cases, quite frankly, the technology is the easy part. It's not easy, but the technology is typically, if you're a technologist, it's possible to kind of wrap your mind around it and kind of see the potential. The people and the processes I think are frankly the most challenging. Automation is a mindset, and those are very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult to change mindsets. If you're used to doing a certain thing in a certain way, and you've had success, maybe you've had years of success, coming in and saying, well, we're going to change everything, that can be a very difficult thing to hear. Also, I mean, so my company, we've been around a long time. We're a big company. We've grown through acquisitions. There are probably thousands of processes, perhaps more, if you look across our entire organization. And they're not well documented. They're not well organized often, but they exist and they work, and the company keeps running along and does pretty well. So why would I want to go in and change that? Especially going back to that people thing, like, well, that's my job. Why would I want to fix that or change that? I should say. How is that better? So absolutely, there are challenges with all of that, and I think one of the benefits of being able to get together in the forum that we do is to be able to sort of talk about those openly. I think, again, we as technologists, we tend to think, well, to kind of lead with that. So here's what's possible. Here are all the cool things we can do. Here are all the amazing things, the value that we can bring to your organization. And that is exciting to talk about. It's really exciting to talk about.
Yeah, it's so I guess I'm a little shocked. I'm pretty vocal about this. It's hard for me to even accept the fact that as technologists, it's just not part of our innate DNA to understand that the world is in constant change. And I understand that it accelerates. We have these sort of blips where big things happen, and we had a lot of big things happen sort of simultaneously, like over the last 10 years. I mean, from cloud, from process of agility, digital transformation concepts. I mean, a lot of new stuff that has come at technologists over the last 10 years. I'm a little bit like, get over it. Like, it's you just gotta deal with it. And if you're an old guy like me, you better really be getting over it and hustling to keep up with keep up with the youngsters who are just like living it. Michael, you talk a little bit about emerging roles in the blog, and we talk a little bit. In fact, at the conference, we've talked a little bit about the evolving roles of DevOps and net DevOps versus Dev NetOps and things like that. What are you seeing out there on the supplier side? Are your customers embracing these role changes? Is there that much fear and trepidation, or do you feel like people are finally listening to me and getting over it? Like what's going on there?
Well, my observation is like the genesis of change in organizations is usually driven by like one of three things. One is, we work with very highly regulated industries, finance and pharma and others. If you fail a compliance audit, that's generally going to like trigger some change in the organization to say what are our processes and why we fail compliance. If you have some sort of security breach or a company in your space has one, and then your execs go, we don't want that happening to us. And the third, and the one that's always plagued us, is a network outage, right? Everyone heard about the Facebook outage caused by BGP that locked people out. They couldn't even access their data center because those all, the authentication of the building was tied into the network. So I think when you think about those kind of three main drivers of, genesis of like creating change inside an organization, when you start to really dive into the organization and drive the change, the big thing people are kind of battling with is the silos that have been created. And I would say the big challenge around implementing automation, especially orchestration, where you're potentially automating across domains, is that it's a cross-domain exercise. And so you obviously have to break down those silos and do that. So I am seeing organizations that are driving, I'd say, two main changes that are becoming very common to see. One is that a lot of organizations are driving things through an IT service manager. And so the service manager will manage the workflow. So I would say kind of automating the administrative part of any network change. And you could think of like a ServiceNow or a Remedy or products like that help document what's happening. You have an approval, the changes are all, whatever is being changed is usually there's some sort of log updated. So you're getting administrative automation through something like a ServiceNow or what we call an IT service manager. The second main thing is you were touching on it, which is in software development, the DevOps pipeline, the CI/CD pipeline has been, I'd say, a very successful mechanism to get software out and iterate software quickly. And applying DevOps principles to the network infrastructure is also something that organizations are starting to really embrace. And that's why you're hearing terms like net DevOps or Dev NetOps, and being able to implement a pipeline of changes. And so those two things are creating quite a bit of change in an organization level to kind of break down the silos, or at least have roles that are kind of span the domains to help tie everything together from an orchestrated standpoint. So a couple observations for you.
Nice. All right, I'm going to go around the horn here, and I'm going to ask everybody what they believe is the most important one or two things that that enterprise organizations need to do to adopt hyperautomation technologies. What are those things that if there's a cultural barrier, a technical barrier, data, whatever it is, I'd like to get an opinion from each of you. And at the end, I'll let you know if you're right or not. How about that? How about that? No pressure. Chris, let's start with you, Ben. What do you think?
We're not even married. That's amazing.
I know. It is amazing. But I've been married multiple times, so I know what I'm talking about here. So Chris, let's start with you, buddy. Like, what do you think are the, like one or two things that, enterprises need to do to adopt a fully functioning, successful hyperautomation strategy?
So maybe the two things that as I also talk about this, that the customer feedback is, so one is around the ability to apply automation everywhere. So automate what you need, not what you can. So a lot of people automate what they can. Like, hey, I'm going to automate this little thing maybe in the cloud because it's easy, but that's not the entire infrastructure. So automating the entire infrastructure, especially in a hybrid world where large enterprises live in, is, I think, one aspect that I wanted to draw attention on. When you have an automation strategy, ensure that you have a roadmap to get the entire thing under control, because otherwise it becomes siloed, and then people forget about it, and then you have disjointedness. So I guess solve for not having a disjointed automation strategy, especially for hybrid infrastructure. And then
I like what you're saying here. Let me hold on one second. I want to make sure I got that right. So you said automate what you need, not what you can. Did I get that right?
That's exactly.
I love that, because it really smacks of business value. So I mean, get after the stuff that's really going to give you business value. Is that fair?
Exactly.
All right. Cool.
That's correct. And I feel like people start with, oh, I know how to automate this, so let me start there, and it goes down a path, and then they look back, oh, that wasn't so successful, that didn't have ROI or whatever, and then it gets abandoned, and then people lose faith in automation. I actually think that
I like that.
Right. So from Gartner, I actually like how Gartner draws attention and invents a new word, because you kind of need a new word. Otherwise, the English word automation or RPA is just so crowded. So you got to coin a term, then define it. So I think that's also a good thing. The second one that I wanted to point out, and I'll pass the baton here, is I also see this sense of, if you automate everything, then you put all, then you do need a proper infrastructure. And then they see, wow, this infrastructure is so powerful. It's got its hooks into all of my gear. What about security, right? And so they're like, oh, because I don't know about the security, I'm not going to automate. That was actually a comment, is that automation is so powerful that I don't know what it's going to do, so I'm not going to do it, right? And I'm afraid of security, and I'm afraid of maybe automation getting hacked and it can take over my network. And from my perspective, that's where best practices comes in. That if you worry about that, I don't think enough time has been spent on it. And so automation is powerful, and it also needs to be done in a secure fashion, all the way from the ground up to the top, so that it's successful. So I would say security is the other aspect that I see
nice
people worry about.
All right, thanks for that. All right, Brian, I'm going to go to you next. Michael, I'm going to give you the last word today, because you're the author of the blog and our hero today. But Brian, what's your hot take on the one or two most important things that enterprises need to do to implement hyperautomation?
Yeah, mine sort of aligns with Karush. I think it starts with a use case. Like, what problem are we trying to solve? Is it the right problem? I also think, and I think that can be double-edged. At the one hand, most enterprises, if you stop and look around, there's ample opportunity to find things that require improvement. You don't want to try to boil the ocean, especially if you're early in your journey. You want to pick something that's doable, and initially, if it's even within your own domain and not cross-domain, that's okay too, because it'll start to tease out some of the other dependencies, like sources of truth and good processes, and getting kind of the right buy-in, and ultimately, because what you're trying to do then is build trust in the automation, build trust in the functionality, and then and along with the value there. To me, that's really kind of where you get started, kind of in the early stages.
Nice, perfect, thanks. All right, Michael, wrap us up, man. Take us home here from where you sit. One or two of the biggest challenges that need to be overcome or done to implement a successful hyperautomation strategy.
Yeah, I would look back to what we produced in the spring, which is around the automation maturity model, and really taking an assessment of where you're at today, really truly understanding how automation is being done and where the opportunities are, because I think that ties into what Karush and Brian were saying about identifying areas where you can have quick wins and get some return on investment, and have a plan to evolve. Tying it into the blog, in the three key areas with O&A as one area, it's really evolving to process automation, I think, is the key thing that we're driving towards. And once you have process automation, you can also tie in event-based automation. So when you think event, you can think triggered by monitoring observability, triggered by syslog, other things. And that ties into the second, pillar of the three pillars that we're working on now, which is that automation infrastructure. And assessing the infrastructure you have, and like Karush was talking about, having out-of-band access and building trust in automation. If you fail an operating system upgrade, is there a way to recover that device without a truck roll, right? And if you have out-of-band access, that would be a mechanism. So having plans and the kind of the hardening, I would say, the maturing and the hardening of the automated infrastructure. And then for AI ops, I think it's a little further out, but what needs to happen right now in a lot of organizations is to begin to understand data, the network data, how they're storing data, look at data modeling, and start to understand what's out there, so that that data can start to be used where you can apply models to it. There's a lot of companies doing great work in this space. There's a lot of cloud companies that are providing tool sets and things and algorithms that are already available. So for me, that one's a little further out from a real implementation, unless you turn on one vendor's cool function. But I think that starting to look at and understand your network data, your infrastructure data, and what you could do with it if you eventually layer in AI and AI ops, and hook it into your automation orchestration. Those would be the key areas. And I think that's, for me, in the working group weekly, these are kind of the things that we're talking about. And we're looking at trying to put material out to help people, move forward in these areas.
That's fantastic. It pains me to say this. It's really hard for me to say this. You're all right. You got it all right. I thought I was going to hammer this one home with you, Michael, at the end. But no, understanding your ROI, so you can go after the right use cases at the right time. Karush, you and Brian both brought this up, but I was going to push this notion around sources of truth that Brian, you said initially, and Mike, you said it slightly differently, about data. I'm telling you, by the way, the opinions I'm about to express are those of mine alone and not of ONUG. But no, if you don't have a good data strategy, you've got nothing. If you haven't made the right investments in data science in the long term, the medium and long term, I don't think you're going to have the outcomes that you want to see in your AI ML space, in hyperautomation space. You've got to have your data squared away. You've got to understand how that stuff lines up. Tell me I'm wrong, guys. Am I wrong? You better have the right investments in data science.
Absolutely.
Anybody want to knock me off the pedestal?
No, I'll just say that, the community has said they brought even infrastructure as code up to a top level initiative. And that's part of it, which is taking your infrastructure and starting to wrap it in code or data modeling where it is programmatically accessible. And you could audit that data. You could do security reviews on that data. You could implement changes using that data. So absolutely.
Maybe one last thing, Michael, Mike, you inspired this. I think one of the things that having an automated network or automated infrastructure enables is that you actually don't have to worry, right? So this, because you can have a golden image with all these data models, that you can always go back to that golden image automatically, right? So even if you screw something up, you can, within, let's say, 40 minutes, get it back to the way it was. So
similar to the cloud model, right, Karush?
Cloud model, totally, right? So you can have this undo button, and then that way it gives freedom to go ahead and explore. Don't be so afraid to experiment, to try new technologies, to swap two VMs with each other and see how it actually works. So it's actually quite liberating. And that's, I think, the message perhaps I wanted to end with, is automation can go from this anxiety around it, which I see, to just completely liberating feeling that people should have.
See how it is? It's just a feel-good story to work on an ONUG working group. That's what's happening here. So I'm going to wrap us up with that, team. And I actually, Michael, glad that you mentioned it the way you did, because I actually do want to draw attention. We have a new working group at ONUG. It is the Policy as Code working group. And that is like literally on our working group session yesterday talking about we were talking specifically about data repositories, and how policy needs to be managed through a matrix of personas and the data associated with that based on what each of these groups and personas need. It's going to be a fascinating project and working group. And quite frankly, I see a lot of overlap with what's happening in hyperautomation. I can see hyperautomation strategies enabling very specifically what's happening in the policy as code space. All right, so thanks everybody. Don't forget, if you want to get involved with the ONUG working groups, just go to onug.net, click on the collaborative. You'll find all about what drives the collaborative, from the board that's made up entirely of enterprise consumers, a steering committee, which is a mix of consumers and suppliers alike. You'll see all the working groups that are there. You'll also be able to check out, again, what's happening at the spring conference, which is, what did I say? It is May 17th and 18th in Dallas. We're going to have a ball, so please join us there. Go to onug.net and check it out. And on behalf of Michael, Kurish, and Brian, thanks for joining us today. We'll see you on the next ONUG podcast. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Mark. Take care.